Right now, I'm in the city of Honiara, which is the capital city of Guadalcanal. And when people come to Guadalcanal, well, they might go to places like Bloody Ridge or Alligator Creek and say that that is the battlefield, and that is correct. But when you are on the streets of Honiara, this is also the battlefield. As a matter of fact, here's my hotel right here that I've been staying at, which at the time of the battle was at the base of what the Marines called Hill 84. And there was a pretty important action that took place here in 1942 that involved a legend in the Marine Corps, a guy by the name of Chesty Puller, and the only U.S. Coast Guardsman to ever be awarded the Medal of Honor. All right, now, like I said, we are in the city of Honiara, and unfortunately, due to urban sprawl, we've lost a decent portion of the battlefield here on Guadalcanal, especially along an area of the Matanikau River, which was to the west of Henderson Field. This was the site of some heavy fighting during the Guadalcanal campaign. We're also here with Dave Holland, who has the channel Guadalcanal Walking the Battlefield. He'll jump in here in a little bit. He's currently writing a book on the actions around the battles of the Matanikau. But anyway, like I was saying, because of urban sprawl, we've lost a lot of the battlefield, so you're going to have to use your imagination a little bit. Now we're going to get back to what happened here around Hill 84 and stuff with Chesty Puller and Munro. But first, I want to show a few of the things that they have here in the city that kind of harken back to the Guadalcanal campaign. Right here by the police station, they have a little memorial park with a few monuments and some artillery pieces in it that we'll show real quick. This is a peace monument, and there you can see some Solomon Islanders with this dugout canoe, and on it it says that men should brothers be, make nations see. And then here you can see some of the different flags depicted on there, and we're just going to do a quick walkthrough of this. If we walk over here, they have a couple of captured Japanese artillery pieces that were here during the Guadalcanal campaign. And on this one in particular, if we go over here, hang on a second, well, you can see right here, now we got a little bit of bullet damage. So my guess is that this is one of the Japanese guns that was close to the coast and probably caught a bullet or two. Oh wow, I didn't even see this one before when I was looking at this. There's another bullet hole. Probably caught some gunfire from a U.S. aircraft that was strafing the position. And then if we go over here, well, here is a Japanese memorial that the Japanese left to memorialize the members of their armed forces that didn't make it off of the island. For the Japanese, they had another name for Guadalcanal. A lot of people will call it Starvation Island. It's probably better translated Hunger Island. So, like, You hear the stories of how the Marines suffered here. The Japanese arguably were in a worse shape than the Americans. By the end of the campaign, they were getting down to like 1/10 rations. But anyway, that's a memorial for the Japanese. And then this one here is really kind of interesting. So this was originally located on another spot on the island, and there's a bronze plaque up here that is dedicated, says, to the many thousands of our CCC buddies, America's tree soldiers of the 1930s, who became a large part of our armed forces during the 1940s, together with their fellow Americans. So the CCC, if you are unaware, stands for the Civilian Conservation Corps. This was one of the relief programs during the New Deal era to help provide assistance and put men to work during the Great Depression. And yeah, I guess the guys who spent time in the CCC before going into the service, that meant something to them, and they put this bronze plaque on this memorial to remember all the guys who served in the CCC before serving in the U.S. Armed Forces. Here's a monument that I wanted to be sure to include because the service of these people really shouldn't be ignored, and that is the service of the Coast Watchers. So the Coast Watchers were Pacific Islanders who were stationed all throughout the Pacific Islands and were equipped with radio equipment, and basically they became kind of the eyes of the U.S. military, or the Allied military in the Pacific. So they would monitor Japanese movements. They would report when ships were passing by islands going from one place to another. So here on this monument you can see depicted, you got a U.S. serviceman, or maybe Australian serviceman rather, with binoculars, and here is one of these Coast Watchers with a firearm and another one with a radio. Bull Halsey said that the Coast Watchers saved, I'm paraphrasing here, he said the Coast Watchers saved the island of Guadalcanal, and the island of Guadalcanal saved the Pacific Campaign. Yeah, so there you go, a monument to the Coast Watchers. Now, let's get back to the fighting around the Matanikau. After the Battle of Bloody Ridge, also known as the Battle of Edson's Ridge, Kawaguchi's forces kind of started moving back to the west to link up with the other Japanese forces that were on the west side of the Matanikau River. Marines were pursuing them, got into a little bit of an engagement, and there was a plan that was cooked up where the Marines were basically going to try and encircle and destroy this element of Japanese on the west side of the Matanikau. So in short, the plan was that the 2nd Battalion of the 5th Marines was going to advance along the coast, come up to the east side of the Matanikau River and cross there. The 1st Raider Battalion was going to go up the Matanikau River, cross over a place called the One Log Bridge, and then come back up. And Chesty Puller's 1st Battalion of the 7th Marines were going to do a shore-to-shore landing where they were going to set out, come around Point Cruz, and land right back over here. We've moved in off of the beach a little bit, and right now we are facing to the west. So the beach is off to our right, and the high ground here in Guadalcanal is off to our left. So again, lots of traffic, lots of buildings, lots of concrete now. But imagine all of this being just jungle and coconut groves. So the first guys from the 1st Battalion, 7th Marines would have crossed right through here, and they would have made their way up to the top of this hill. This is Hill 84. Now, when the Marines were naming hills, they didn't do it by height. They just had a numbering system. We're like, okay, this is Hill 1, this is Hill 2, this is Hill 3. So when I say Hill 84, don't take that to mean, you know, the height, because my hotel is on the side of that hill, and I can tell you it is one heck of a steep climb. All right, so we're going to go up there now and link up with Dave Holland and talk about what happened up on top of Hill 84. All right, we are at the base of Hill 84, and we're using this staircase to kind of follow in the path of the Marines who would have ascended this hill. And let me just take a moment to say something about Guadalcanal. This place is insanely hot. Like, it's about mid-morning, around 8:30, 9 o'clock right now. I'm just hanging around the hotel, so I didn't bring a water with me because I thought that I'd be back pretty soon. And just in the time that I've been out, I'm already parched. It's ridiculous. I trained quite a bit preparing for this trip, and I won't lie, this heat has been oppressive. So a lot of the problems that the Marines had here were honestly from heat casualties. And right now, I'm not loaded, well, I've got some gear on, but I'm not loaded down like the Marines were. I don't have anybody shooting at me. But yeah, this is a brutal place to fight. All right, I'm gonna shut this off and we're gonna get up to the top and talk to Dave a little bit.
All right, so around midday on the 27th of September 42, elements of the 1st Battalion, 7th Marines, which is A Company, B Company, and elements of D Company, advanced up Hill 84 behind me. This is facing north. The 1st Company made it to the top of the hill. The 2nd Company was starting to come up, and they noticed a number of Japanese advancing from the west, which is that direction. Machine gun team set up and started engaging them to hold them back so the rest of the company could make it up top of the ridge. That machine gun company was taken out, but they managed to establish themselves on top of this ridge. At that stage, the Marines were faced with Japanese coming from all directions, so there was a chance of them being cut off. So it was Major Ortho Rogers, and Ortho Rogers was the executive officer of the 1st Battalion, 7th Marines. And so Chesty Puller, the battalion commander, was on the other side of Matanikau. At this stage, he'd actually flagged down a destroyer and was on top on the USS Monson en route. So his battalion was under the command of Rogers. So Rogers had taken the command, and Rogers had established his command post on the hill right behind me. So Japanese are coming in on them. Rogers has called a command group to find out, okay, what are we going to do now? What's our next steps? So he called up these 2 company commanders and a number of MCOs. So in the process of calling them to a command group, a knee mortar round landed at the foot of Rogers, cutting him in half, severely wounded one of the company commanders. So the command and control was kind of knocked out. Captain Kelly, the only surviving captain of the battalion, a pretty cool customer, level-headed, took charge. At that stage, the Marines had left the radio behind. So Sergeant Raysbrook, who was the communicator, whether he was voluntold or whatever, maybe because he felt guilty for leaving the radio behind his section, had jumped up on the ridge with semaphore flags. The USS Monson was coming around Point Cruz, and they said, evacuate. And he said, we can't evacuate through the signal codes because the Japanese are surrounded. Give us supporting fire. So they managed to land, call in supporting fire to the right and left of the Marines with 5-inch naval rounds, creating a corridor. So at that stage, the Marines started retrograding off the top, 1 company at a time. There was a young private in D Company named John Giles. So he was at the point of the end of Hill 84, not too far from I am now, with a machine gun. So I don't know if it was a 1919 or 1917 machine gun. It's not really stated who was on a machine gun. I want to say it's probably 1919. Anyway, Giles says, retrograde back or go back, I'll have you covered. So the rest of his guys moved off, and Giles stayed at position, firing to the end. To this day, his body is somewhere around this area, along with Ortho Rogers and a number of other Marines on this hill. And then once they got to the bottom, then they had to fight their way through the Japanese defenses to the evacuation beaches.
All right, now there is a lot of urban development that has taken over this hill. So this is kind of the best view that we have from up here. So what we are looking at right now is the corridor that these Marines are going to be using to evacuate this hill. So you can just imagine there's naval gunfire on our left, there's naval gunfire on our right to try and keep the Japanese out of this corridor. And the ones who were left would have just been pouring off of this hill down to the bottom trying to make it to the beach. All right, we've made it back down to the bottom of the hill. And like I said earlier, it is just insanely hot here, and it's not even the middle of the day. I honestly don't know how these guys did it. If you watch my series in like Saipan and Tinian and Guam, this is worse. The heat is worse here than it was in Saipan, if you can even imagine that. So the Marines, once they got down here, you can imagine, again, this is all like coconut grove and palm or jungle and, you know, thick cover in some areas. But just because they made it to the bottom of the hill didn't mean that their ordeal was over yet. So after coming down off of Hill 81, again, the Marines are still in the thick of it. So again, right there is my hotel. And in the midst of all of this gunfire, there was a BAR man by the name of Anthony Malinowski who started laying down heavy fire to cover the Marines as they were coming off of the hill. And one of them shouted out to Malinowski that they were headed down to the beach, and he said, "Go ahead, I'll be right behind you." And unfortunately, right here in this area is where Malinowski would stay. He was killed right here in this general vicinity, and his body was never recovered. He and probably about 17 other Marines are still underneath all of this concrete and asphalt in this part of Honiara, which is pretty sad. So we're literally kind of walking on a cemetery when we're walking the streets of Honiara. But the Marines who survived started making their way this direction to get to the beach to be evacuated. We have made our way back down to the beach here. And on September 27th, you can just imagine the chaos that was unfolding along this beach as these Marines from the 7th Regiment were trying to just like escape from this corridor of death. And stepping into the breach to help protect these Marines as they were making their way to their landing craft was a Coast Guard signalman by the name of Dougas Munro. So Dougas Munro was a signalman first class with the Coast Guard and was right here on Guadalcanal. We often talk about the Navy and the Marines and the Army here at Guadalcanal, but the Coast Guard was here as well. So you got Chesty Puller, who has come in with these Navy boats and ships and the destroyer and are trying to evacuate these Marines. Again, you can just imagine the chaos on this beach as these Marines are trying to make their way to the landing craft to get out of this hornet's nest. And there was one of the landing craft over on the other side of this breakwater that got hung up either on a reef or on a sandbar. There are a couple of different accounts. If you look at it today, it seems more likely that it was a reef. But anyway, it got hung up and had to be chained to another landing craft to be pulled off. Well, off over here on Point Cruz, these guys are still taking machine gun fire from the Japanese and entering into the breach to protect these Marines and to protect this landing craft that was stuck was the boat of Munro. He was manning a .30 caliber machine gun and came up right out here in this area in front of us and was engaging the Japanese while these Marines were being evacuated. And another guy in the boat later said that he saw this line of machine gun fire kicking up water heading right for their boat, and he hollered out to Munro, and Munro didn't hear him, and unfortunately one of those bullets caught him right in the back of the neck, kind of at the base of the skull, and he went down. Was unconscious for a little bit. They evacuated the Marines, and at some point the story is that he came to and asked, did they get off? And they gave him the affirmation that they had rescued these Marines, and then he slipped back into unconsciousness and passed away. The evacuation of the Marines here would later be referred to as the Little Dunkirk. And Chesty Puller himself would recommend Munro for the Medal of Honor. His family would later receive that award from FDR on his behalf, making Munro the only Coast Guardsman in U.S. history to receive this nation's highest award for his actions right here on the 27th of September, 1942.